Hello, this is Brian. Welcome to another episode of Spotlight on Trees. Today I want to focus on a very common low elevation tree here in California basically from Baja, California up to it is called the California Platanus racemosa. And I am at quite a Christmas festival here. I am at the Monte Cristo Campground in Angeles National Forest. You got Angeles Forest Highway running that way to Palmdale. Angeles Crest Highway is several miles up that way. And about an elevation of 3,500 feet above sea level. And what can I say about the California Sycamore? Magnificent tree. Magnificent tree. Capable of reaching very large sizes. Probably one of the largest broadleaf trees here, especially in Southern California. Capable of humongous trunks that are several feet wide, often multi-trunked. As you can see, the trees here in Monte Cristo Campground are multi-trunked, often as a result of clonal sprouting and resprouting from the roots when fire and other disturbance comes along. So, California Sycamore is also called Aliso. That's the Spanish name for it, Aliso. And there are a lot of places in California with the name Aliso attached to them. Aliso Viejo in Orange County, Aliso Canyon, Aliso and Wood Canyons Regional Park. So there are a lot of things named after this noble tree. So the characteristics of the California sycamore: often multi-trunked, sometimes very large trunks, as you can see here. Large leaves, large branches, and the typical modeling of the bark. Very typical of sycamore. It's generally a low elevation tree. Occasionally you'll see it a little above 5,000 feet, but it's not very common. Usually it's mostly found below 5,000 feet. And here we got the leaves. They're maple shaped. So somebody not super familiar with a California sycamore might confuse this with the maple. And before you know a lot about trees, the same thing. Confuse them with maples. So here's a close-up of the California sycamore leaf. Star-shaped, kind of like a maple, but kind of velvety and fuzzy, especially on the leaves. Water sprouts, or suckers as they call them. And around the twig, you'll notice they have these little leafy things called stipules. That's what these are right here. Especially on the most vigorous shoots, you'll see the largest stipules. The California sycamore can be a very vigorous resprouter and a fairly decently fast-growing tree. Not necessarily always in the creek beds, as you can see here. There's no creek bed here. You got to go down there. So sometimes you can find quite a distance away from water sources. Noticeable water sources. But you can be assured that these roots go down deep and collect a lot of water. So sycamore trees are not super drought tolerant. As you can see here, it looks pretty dry, but be assured that there is an underground water source for these trees to survive and be so vigorous. So as for morphology of the tree, it's a very crooked, irregular crown, crooked branches, sometimes leaning trunks. You can see here, generally broad crowns, sometimes broader than tall. And for size, California sycamores tend to be in the anywhere from 30 to 80 feet. That's the typical height for a California sycamore. Average height is over 100 feet. Very common. So again, star-shaped leaves, pretty large leaves. That's another thing. Trees with large leaves, large thin leaves like these, tend to grow where there's water. Otherwise, they would transpire way too much, and they would transpire more than they gain, and they would dry out and die. So, like I said, these trees can occasionally get up to 100 feet tall. Here's that specimen I first started with. Very decent sized sycamore. I showed you the trunks on it. Beautiful trees. Another thing about them is that they are winter deciduous. In other words, they shed their leaves in fall, leafless during winter, and leaf out in spring. But that's not a fast fact. Because in some warmer climates, some of the warmest areas where California sycamore grows, where the winters are the warmest, some of them might retain some leaves into the winter months. Especially in the very low elevations. These ones here are pretty sure that they are all leafless. So they're considered winter deciduous, but sometimes in very warm winters they might still carry some leaves well into January. So some sycamores will retain some foliage. Okay. So another thing about the sycamore is that its flowers, both male and female flowers, come in these ball-shaped clusters. And since it's August, it's kind of late to show the flowers. But they're these long stalks that have little balls on each side of the stalk, alternating down, kind of like a raceme, R-A-C-E-M-E. That's where racemosa comes from. And their fruit is a series of tufted seeds that also form a ball in the same manner. That right there, that's a seed. That's a cluster of seed balls. That's only two of them. Usually they have several of them hanging down from a cluster. But you see here, they disintegrate. The seeds disintegrate because each ball has a lot of seeds in it. And usually the trees will be flowering when they leaf out at low elevations, like San Diego County, Orange County. They might leaf out as early as February because it's a warm climate. So the flowers and leaves start opening up. But higher up like this, I suspect probably late March, or maybe late March. And higher up towards their elevational limits, they'll start leafing out probably towards early mid-April, maybe. But magnificent tree. One thing to note about California sycamore, its fuzzy leaves give off a really pleasant aroma. Very pleasant aroma. It's kind of woodsy. It's not really strong. It's not really pungent. It's a very soft, subtle, woodsy aroma. And it's probably one of the most pleasant smells you're going to encounter when you're in sycamore territory. The hairs on the leaves might make your nose a little itchy, but if you sniff a leaf, sometimes you don't even have to go up to a leaf and sniff it. Especially the underside. The underside has a very pleasant aroma. And see the branches that are not quite as the older branches don't have quite as large leaves. So these are kind of typical higher up in the canopy of the tree. But the leaves are kind of fuzzy on both sides. The bottom side maybe a little bit more a little fuzzier than the top. And I say, what a magnificent tree. Okay, so I mentioned it's deciduous. It means shedding its leaves seasonally. It's winter deciduous. So what does that mean for fall color? Well, California sycamore is not known in literature to be a quote-unquote brilliant fall color tree. However, my experience tells me that it might not be as brilliant as quaking aspen, black cottonwood, might not be as brilliant as sugar maple. It does have fall color. Usually it's kind of a golden tannish brown, and in some cases yellowish. And groves of these trees actually look very pretty in fall. So I imagine this area probably come more towards probably November. I would say these trees tend to lose their leaves a little bit later than a lot of other deciduous trees here. They're one of the later species to go deciduous, so probably November or maybe early December would be a good time to see these trees in color. So their fall color tends to be tannish brownish with some yellow. Some leaves will turn a nice buttery yellow. A lot of leaves will start getting that kind of brownish hue to them, but it's not like a dull brown. Like from a distance, you're looking down a canyon and you see some orangish brown trees all along the creek bed. You're most likely looking at California sycamores. Now, habitat-wise, I mentioned they like to be near where their roots can tap into moisture, because these big leaves, big thin leaves, transpire a lot because there's a lot of surface area. So we're looking at canyons, valley bottoms, and sometimes upslope on steep gullies. Sometimes they'll find natural spring water in the soil. So sometimes you'll be driving and you'll see California sycamores seemingly out of place on high up on slopes, but it's usually in a gully because there's some kind of spring water in the area for them to sustain their life. So, one thing of note is California sycamore is a very widely planted ornamental tree. You can find it planted in the middle of the cities, in the suburbs. Where I live in Orange County, they're planted everywhere. And they're often also planted next to a close relative of theirs called London plane tree, which is known as Platinus Hispanica. It used to be, and still sometimes called Platanus acerifolia. Now, that can create a problem in wildlands. And I've seen evidence of it in San Clemente Canyon, in just north of the Claremont neighborhood in San Diego, near the just south of the 52 freeway. San Clemente Canyon, you know, there are lots of neighborhoods on top of the canyon. That's how a lot of neighborhoods are in San Diego. Crooked streets, or windy streets with canyons in between the neighborhoods. And so what'll happen is people will plant London plane trees all over. There are none around here to showcase. Their leaves are quite maple shape, but they're not as fuzzy as California sycamore. London plane tree and California sycamore can hybridize. Again, near the trail that leads up, near the Biltmore Trail, not that far from the main canyon bottom, from the Regent's Road side, I've seen evidence of a hybrid sycamore. Intermediate characteristics between California sycamore and London plane tree. So we got to watch out that the California sycamore's DNA doesn't get contaminated with non-native plants. When I say magnificent trees, beautiful trees, provide some great shade in lower elevation areas where it gets really hot in the summer. It's not super hot today. It's probably about 90 degrees. It's hot, I mean, it's hot for me. But in this area, it can easily hit 100 degrees. Good shade tree, just a lot of leaf cleanup. Well, that's about it. California Sycamore, Platanus racemosa. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.